Hi, welcome to the Legislators Lounge. I'm Jim Webb, the host of the show, and the co-host of the show is Brian Chericello. Today with us is Marilinda Garcia, who is also a state representative from Salem, and she's also the candidate for Congress in the 2nd District. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome,
both of you.
Marilinda.
Nice to see you here instead of in Concord for once.
Yeah, absolutely. With there's 400 people.
Yeah.
A lot of busy stuff. Marilinda, let's start with some of the people may not know who you are, so maybe a little bit of a background for the audience would be great.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I'm a state representative. I represent the Sound of Salem. It was formerly Salem and Windham. I'm in my 4th term. So about my 8th year serving, and I've been on the Finance Committee now for the last 2 terms. So we work on the state budget the first year of every session and then deal with all of the legislation that affects the state's revenue in terms of what we're spending. I also have lived in Salem since I was about 5 years old. I returned to school in Boston for my bachelor's and master's degrees and have been happily situated here ever since. I teach at Phillips Exeter part-time and serve in the legislature. And during my time there, I've been very active in trying to help develop New Hampshire's economy in the long term. Right. So some of the areas that have interested me are the innovation economy, the high-tech industry, and the specialty sector as it relates to healthcare. So most of what that entails are regulatory reform issues, and then of course our tax climate in the state. So also in healthcare, I've been working a lot on making that healthcare ecosystem we have in the state more responsive and consumer-oriented and transparent for people. So we've been working on pricing transparency in healthcare and open data in insurance claims. And what's great, as you know, about being a state legislator is we're very close to our constituents. We're in the community. We immediately, have so many resources at our fingertips in terms of being able to talk to community leaders, business leaders, and everyone about what issues concern them. What are the challenges we have in the state? And then we can try to work on them proactively in the state legislature through our legislative initiatives. So one of the reasons I decided to run for Congress in District 2 against Congresswoman Custer, who's currently there, is that I found that in recent years, the federal government has not been in any way helpful to New Hampshire achieving reforms that the people are looking for. I've found instead that the federal government has become adversarial and is enacting policies that, in fact, not only divert, our time and energy in the reforms we've been trying to achieve, but then also are just mandates that are across the board that reduce everyone to the lowest common denominator and that frankly wreak havoc in our different ecosystems. And of course, the main one right now is health care. It has not been a positive force in our state. And so I think that if we're going to be able to achieve these things, we need to replace the leadership we have in Washington. So I'm running.
Oh, very good.
Oh, that's great. As far as you mentioned healthcare was the number one, and I think we will all agree upon that healthcare is our number one issue right now, especially with the Obamacare starting to kick in, and people seeing like just today, I got to see some of the numbers from my company, what it's going to cost me for my health insurance, and it's just going up and up and up, and co-pays are going up, and it just continuously.
I thought your smile wasn't as big this afternoon. Usually
well,
just kidding.
I'll survive. No, I'll survive, but it's the idea, when people. Because my wife also works too, so when I still work full time, even though I'm in the legislature. So it's kind of difficult to do both, but I manage, and we do the show.
Yeah,
so,
good for you.
So, want to expand a little bit on the health care and what you think you might be able to do with regards to that, the constituents, because you're going to be actually on a national level when you're in Congress. It's not just New Hampshire.
Right. Well, exactly. But part of that is being responsive again to what the problems that are in New Hampshire, and what it is they're facing. So right now, to your point, I talked to a business owner who said last Christmas, instead of Christmas bonuses, he had to tell his employees, that's all going right to your increased health care costs. I talked to a company today that help navigate people in terms of their health insurance and coverage, and he said, we have about the worst job in the world right now. We talk to people such as, one lady, they call us and we have to say, so your premium that used to be $400 is now going up to $1,200.
Wow.
And this is a woman on a fixed income, on disability, So I talked to another fellow who, he has 5 kids. They've been, now, they're in age range from like 11 to 20 something, but he said, we've been going to the same doctor and hospital, someone we trust, place we're comfortable with for almost 2 decades, and now it's out of network, So, I mean, these are the actual things that our citizens are dealing with right now. And on the federal level, we have people that are either completely ignoring that, or 2, of course, lied about it in the first place. And we use words like misled, weren't sure, but in fact, it was a bald-faced lie in so many aspects. You can keep your coverage, you can keep your doctor, all of these things. And of course, as we know, talk about the antithesis of actually working together to achieve good things for the American people. This is a bill that was completely partisan. There wasn't a single Republican vote. It was shoved through on, it was Christmas Eve, right, more or less. And so, I mean, that type of thing alone would be something one would hope, and I hope, I would be able to help prevent from happening. I mean, it's one thing to say your federal government isn't making any positive changes in your life, but it's another one to say they're hurting me.
Right, that's a good point. That's a good point. So what do we think we should do? Do you think we should reform healthcare or to repeal it? I mean, which
well, as you know, I mean, there is that sort of debate in that people are saying, okay, I want to repeal it, or then in practicality, can we actually repeal it? And I'm no different. I don't like to make promises I can't keep.
Right.
So sure, I would like to repeal it, at least everything that's negative about it, because as with anything that's sort of comprehensive, it does include a few, good things. But
like for instance, the one of them I would say
pre-existing
conditions was great. Another one, which is good and bad because it actually cost me, but that's why it's bad. But it's good for other people. They were able to stay on their parents' insurance until they were 26.
Right, which is responsive to, frankly, our poor economic circumstances right now. That generation of people. It's a challenge. If they can't find a job, they can't get employer-sponsored insurance.
But if they're, that's like you say. If you don't have a job, then how are you going to stay on your parents' insurance, right? If parents don't have a job,
right? Exactly.
Or if your parents have lost their coverage because of this, how are you going to stay on there?
Right.
So it's kind of like
so it's a challenge. But to your question, so then you say, okay, and then if it were an up and down vote, sure, repeal it and then replace the good parts of it. But in fact, as you know, things aren't always an up and down vote. So I don't know if that would be possible. But what one can do is go through and try to dismantle it, as effectively as possible. Reverse, frankly, these things that the president now himself keeps, just sort of stopping, And it's questionable, of course, if he ought to be, if he actually has the power to do that. What's the point of Congress, right? If he's just...
Well, when you like your challenge, the person, Annie Custer, has endorsed the president all the way, right down the line. And to me, that is... if you endorsed them and you voted for this and you wanted this, then you need to be held accountable as well.
Well, in her instance, it's actually more insidious, if one would use that word, in that she was a champion for him when he was running the first time and the second time. Then she was obviously an advocate and champion of this law. Though she's only been in office now 1 term, though she wasn't there to vote for it, while she was there, she did vote against all of the Republican-led delays, to all these mandates. Now, all of a sudden, that the president, is enacting them himself, she says it's a good thing. But then she actually went so far as, I think it was 3 weeks ago on NHPR, she said, if I had been in Congress when this law passed, I would have voted for it. And then she also said, I consider myself, I'm paraphrasing, but I consider myself the strongest supporter of the president in the entire U.S. Congress. So, she's embracing this with both arms.
Right.
So.
Wow. you think she's just out of touch, or she doesn't understand? Because I mean, we see the poll numbers,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's not good. People just do not like this Obamacare.
Yeah, well,
The president's approval rating is going down,
Yeah.
so to jump on board to somebody,
Yeah.
I don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, and one could say it's, a poor political calculation, but okay, I'm not one that loves, people that calculate those things anyway. So in other words, if people were opposed to it, but I thought it was a great thing, and it actually was, then that's one thing. Right. But in this case, it's detrimental to the state, it's harmful to people,
right.
and people are actively saying, they don't want it, businesses don't want it, nobody wants it for
right.
the most part, and she's instead, again, to your point, just not being responsive to that. And I've actually heard that, because now that I've been getting around the state, talking with people and organizations, they say, frankly, some of the other people in representation on the other side of the aisle, they actually will take my calls. They're in the community, all of this, and they may not, vote the way I want, but at least they listen. Whereas she just seems to be completely out of touch, not responsive. And then on the issues where, it does matter to, for example, I was talking to the National Federation of Independent Business, and I thought, well, I'm sure she's going to have a poor record, by their standards, because they, of course, support entrepreneurship and innovation and all these things. And they said, actually, she's the worst. They said she's 0 for 8, so that's really bad. And this is her first term. That's why I'm trying to help ensure she doesn't have a second.
You mentioned that you got your bachelor's and all that. What school did you go to?
So I actually have 2 bachelor's degrees. I went to Tufts University and New England Conservatory of Music. I did a joint degree there. This is a 5-year program. And then I got my master's at Harvard in public policy. So I did a focus in operations management and higher ed administration. So
Excellent.
it was tough, especially because while I was in grad school, I won't go through the whole thing, but for half of one term, in any case, I had been reelected through a special election, and so it was really difficult. I was working at Exeter in grad school in Concord, working as a CASA in the Salem District Court. So
I know the feeling.
It was it was quite a year. And then the joint degree program, honestly, if I have any time management skills to speak of, I probably gained them all during that program, because even there I had to commute between the campuses. It was tough. So
We'll jump back to the national level. I just want to get your thoughts on Benghazi and what happened there. So.
Well, that's good.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, at the very least, everyone, again, no matter what side of the aisle, how much you have on the line politically, you should be able to, one, say, I know it occurred, I know where it occurred, and it's a horrible tragedy. We lost an ambassador, we lost servicemen. It was a huge, security letdown. It was an international incident, and that is, unacceptable and atrocious. It really is, and extremely sad. But one of my concerns is, it's one thing, again, to say, well, we will, try to be better leaders. We'll step up, our foreign policy. We'll step up our, lines of communication and security, communications, all of these things that people question, who gave what signal and, who made what call and all these things. But to me, the fact that our president, our Secretary of State, and a number of other officials came before the American people and told us that this incident occurred because some random man in, California, had posted some YouTube video that incited it.
About them burning a Quran or something like that.
And said that it was his fault. And then his home was raided, I believe, and he was imprisoned for that, and they just lied about that for weeks.
Right.
And then, the real story, as best as we can ascertain, came out. And so the fact that that can happen in this country, an innocent person, doing nothing that's against the law was actually found themselves. And I don't. Has he ever gotten out of jail to this point?
I don't know, but I'm very concerned about how that went down, because it was right before the election.
Yeah.
They kept it from the public, from the people, so the people really didn't know.
And they lied about it specifically. They knew that wasn't the case, and so that's problematic. And that extends to what we're seeing now, with the IRS.
Yes.
Here we have, again, freedom of speech, freedom of association, personal, private information, and the arm of government is taking that and using it to persecute people.
Right.
I mean, that is...
Well, yeah,
a
the
real
IRS
concern.
itself, to me, I think personally, my opinion is that, but I'm not running for Congress. But
I need to know your
my personal opinion is that we had a flat rate tax and do away with the IRS, because we wouldn't need them then. Everybody would just pay their flat rate and be
That's
done
true.
with it.
I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea.
So that's what
proposals.
that's how I would go about it. But on a national level, looking at foreign policy, since if you do get elected to Congress, you will have to be privy to a lot of things that we don't know. And as far as that goes, what do you think of what's happening with, for instance, Russia right now,
Sure.
and the problems we're having?
Right. Well, to your point, one of the challenging things about running for an office where you will be, have all of this information, and so, answering these questions and, having these opinions versus someone who's actually there, and then being able to answer, it is challenging. So, I don't pretend, I don't have briefings from, national intelligence officials, all that, but I can tell you that in my opinion, we have a failure of leadership. And what I mean by that, and that's one issue, and that is, regardless of how one thinks in terms of our foreign policy, that we should be hawkish or not, or more diplomatic or this and that. At the end of the day, and I think this goes across all areas of life, if you say you're going to do something, if you tell someone, be that a person, a aggressive foreign nation, whatever the case may be, that if you do this, there will be this consequence, and you don't follow through, that's just weakness.
Empty threats.
Exactly. It's an empty threat. So that's something that's run rampant, again, with this administration. So that's the first problem. So nobody cares, or cares what we say, because we don't actually follow through.
Follow through.
Yeah, so that's the first problem. Secondly, is that, frankly, our economic power is extremely important to our national security. And that is because if we are not economically powerful, if we don't clean up our own house, if we can't sustain ourselves, our own economy, rely on our own energy resources, on all of these things, then and if our debt, is owned more by others than, and enemies, frankly, rather than friends, or frenemies, as they say.
I've never heard of that term yet, but that's a good one.
Well, in other words, ones that we do trade with,
Yeah.
We have a diplomatic relationship, but frankly, my point is, once they no longer respect us and then no longer fear us if we keep, reducing our military might, and again, are just very soft and have no spine behind what we say,
there's also,
that's when we give them leeway to be aggressive.
or
and
they
you see
start
them.
producing our military.
Right.
I mean, how do we deal with a country that we rely on to give us the hardware
Right.
that actually is not a friendly
Right.
country? Well, right now they are, but
Right.
we should never have our national security subject to another nation's whim.
Well, exactly that, and then and with Russia specifically, to your question, look, they've been testing us for a while. You saw that with the Republic of Georgia, a number of years ago. What was our response then? There was no clarity, nothing really. And now here you have the Ukraine, and again, where are we? I couldn't tell you, based on what I hear from the administration, what we as a country, what our position is right now.
Right, and I guess some of the troops they're increasing the troops on the border. I think it was.
They said it was a military games of some sort, but that doesn't mean that's what it actually is.
Right. Well, and again, they're able to do that in so many ways. One, because they just kind
Yeah.
of, wear nothing, I guess, and then other because,
No respect.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have a presence there. So.
Yeah, well, that, and also, the Ukraine relies on them, in terms of energy, and Western Europe, also. So,
But now, let's get back to that just for a second, because there's one thing that kind of bothers me, is that the actual people voted to go back to the Russians.
Right.
So, as Americans, we pride our ability to vote, and I would hope that that was an open election that they had, and it didn't appear, nobody's saying it wasn't. So if the people wanted to.
What do you think from past experience?
Well, I won't take an opinion, but I mean, I don't see anybody crying that
did
it's
anyone
not.
pass away suddenly
Yeah,
the night
right.
before? I don't know.
Yeah, what's that called? What was that?
Well, there's certainly a lot in the national.
Right. I mean, look, I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't have the answer in my desk drawer. It's
Right.
extremely complex, increasingly now,
Yes.
more than ever. But there is something to be said about letting your friends know that, we're there, we're supporting them, we're your friends, we are the beacon of, democracy and freedom.
Right.
And then also just keeping your word and being clear, So.
Yeah, you see a lot of people trying to sneak into the United States. You don't see too many trying to sneak out.
Right. No, I know.
So I
That's
mean,
always a good sign,
we still are
you know?
the beacon of the world for the refugees
Right.
and whoever.
Right.
They all strive to be like us.
Uh-huh.
I think we need to regain that
Yep.
position, and
Yep.
I think the last 8 years or 7 years has really done a number on this country as far as the economy going down, bailing out. What do you think of bailing out the banks the way they did that? I mean, that's something that's going to be an issue.
Yeah.
for
Well,
Congress.
I mean, it's one where, for all we know, we could have the same situation again, soon, which is problematic.
Well, from what I understand, it went from being like 7 down to 5, but it still exists.
Sure.
So,
It's a problem. I mean, when it comes to this, stimulus bills, one can argue, look, the first one, we were just at such, a catastrophic point. Something did need to be done. But then, of course, the implementation of it was a disaster. So it's really unfortunate that even when government, frankly, is compelled to act in ways I would otherwise be inclined to oppose, that you can't count on them to do it in an efficient way. You know what I mean?
Right,
So that's unfortunate. But then it just feeds into what just seems to be a way of being, for this administration, in that, there are no consequences for things, and that they want to control and, frankly, be all things to all people, which is not the purpose, of the government. And going farther than that, they also promote this philosophy and idea that, collectivism and progressivism are the way to go, and that the government is here to ensure equality of outcome, and what that means is, it means we reduce everyone to the lowest common denominator, when really my belief, and what I would hope to be communicating if I, were able to be elected to this national platform, is say that, look, what has made our country exceptional is that we promote equality of opportunity. That's what we offer to everyone. You can make the most of yourself, and the government isn't going to get in your way, and you don't owe your resources to other people. That's what you do because you want to, you're charitable, and that's where things are motivated, from the right place, and that's where you have that human connection and that sense of community. Whereas if the government is continually raiding, your resources, then you're not going to be giving, of yourself.
Yeah, I believe it was said, and I can remember this one thing. I was watching news one night, and Michelle Obama was on there, and she said something about a piece of pie. She says, we have to take some of your pie away to give it to the people who don't have pie. Well, I worked hard for my pie.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little bit older
And
now.
I bet you give away your pie yourself.
We give lots of pie away every year.
Yep. So,
My wife and I are very charitable.
Exactly. And that's the America.
But it's our choice.
Exactly. And that's
the
what
difference.
makes it beautiful, charity. That's the way it should be. And, they've seen, after all of these natural disasters that have occurred across the world, we're the most charitable nation in the country. And that's because up until now, we've been allowed to do what we want with our resources. And that means we want to help people, and we do.
Right.
But when the government takes it from you, then you see, I spent some time in Haiti and working on establishing a foundation there, after their disaster of a number of years ago.
Yeah.
And it was a perfect example. I mean, it was just sad in that, and this is also the case across Africa, in so many of these places where you can give these resources, charitable people, but all of a sudden the government officials, which are inclined to corruption, they make it all becomes garbage, literally.
They take it away.
Yeah, they take it away, they divert it, and they are not efficient stewards of
Americans
what it
have
should be.
very big hearts when it comes to stuff like that. And I know my brother-in-law went down to Haiti as well. He was there for 6 months.
Yeah, wow, yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. Let's talk about immigration and immigration reform. I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. Another huge, huge issue that needs serious reform. And I wish it hasn't become, and it has, unfortunately, such a wedge, issue. And I'll tell you, my first concern is that, and we see this with healthcare, they always seem to try to do this comprehensive approach to everything, which in theory sounds good, but in practice means they'll implement a few good things and then something awful, and then, what do, right? Because then you're either accused of voting against, reform, or you're accused of being a traitor and voting for something bad, So
Right.
I would really hope that there's a way, within that process that one could actively reform. For example, we're a country, we have rule of law, we have laws, we have an immigration process. It needs work, but right now we don't enforce so much of it.
Right.
We don't secure our borders. We crack down on the wrong, immigrant situations.
Or not even immigrants, on Americans.
Yeah, well, that too.
They'll crack down on us as we go through the airports.
Exactly.
But yet,
right. Well, but also we're too reactive. For example, after 9/11, there was a huge crackdown on student visas, So at the same time, our borders are completely porous, and you have all this criminal activity occurring. There's so much, in the drug trade, so much going on. Then we also, again, become a burden to employers, right, who are hiring people. They have good workers, and then all of a sudden, they find out there may be an issue. They report it to the INS or wherever they're supposed to, and then they say, oh, well, or they say, okay, now you have to hire lawyers. We're going to take away your entire workforce, go through this.
Yeah.
And then what do? Everyone leaves that company and just moves down the street to the next place. I've heard that story so many times. So at the end of the day, I think we make it too easy to stay here illegally and too difficult to stay here legally. And that's a big problem.
I think you're absolutely right. I think what we have to do is, if you want to stay in this country, then go to the back of the line, not to the front of the line. We're rewarding people that are trying to break, that actually, if somebody broke into your, this is our home. This is our home, the United States. Somebody breaks into your home, do you let them stay there, or you say, no, get out?
Right.
And that's basically what's happening. But well, say well, I'll take so many people into my home, But the ones that were in line first should get it, not the people that are coming in here illegally.
I mean, in that, look, that's the other problem. There's a lot of, sort of toxic rhetoric, too, in that, come on, the vast majority of immigrants that want to be here, it's for all the reasons that all the immigrants before have. We're
Right.
still...
It's the same reason why we want to stay here.
It is the land of opportunity.
It is,
You can,
absolutely.
make
Quality
a
of
life
life.
here, all these things.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate that everyone, sometimes people lump them all into this, bad category. But at the same time, we have a process, we have laws. So to your point, you can't just say, okay, here we go, and then all of the ones who have been waiting, and going through the process
Yeah, because now
correctly,
you can only let
to
so many in
decide.
at a time, or
Yeah.
it affects, because especially if they're going on to any kind of social program,
right.
or whatever they may need to get themselves
Right,
going
right.
and become successful in this
Right,
country.
right.
But we can't absorb that ourselves as the
Right.
workers that are working and
Sure.
paying the bills. So we kind of have to say, okay, we'll let so many,
Right.
and those are all set, by the way, by the government, not by us, but by the government sets the numbers. If this country is under siege or something, you might
Sure.
allow more, and there might be
Sure,
exceptions,
sure.
political reasons and so forth.
Well, and I think we should just, understand, just pulling things back to common sense. I mean, if I go to a foreign country, I don't assume I have any, rights whatsoever. If I want to be a
Absolutely.
citizen there, I have to go about it the correct way. And I don't think that's too much to expect, from people in our country.
Yeah,
Well,
very
I think what's happened now in our country is I see I watch the news all the time, and when I see that an American flag is being taken down and another nation's flag put up in its place at one of our schools,
Oh, yeah.
to me, that's like, those people
Right.
should be in jail.
Right, that's troublesome. It's too. I mean, that's what's beautiful. I
Well,
like to
actually,
say.
I'll go one step further while I'm on this. I think it was Supreme Court just ruled there was a child that wore an American flag shirt to school, and he was not allowed to wear the American flag on his shirt
What state?
on Cinco de Mayo.
What? No. Yeah. See, that's where.
He's an American. Why
Now
not?
we can talk about our judicial system. No,
Yeah.
no, but I mean, I just wanted to say, I mean, and that again is what, not what you said, but what is beautiful about our country in that people can actually, St. Patrick's Day, like,
Yeah.
good, Irish heritage, wonderful. I'm half Italian, half Hispanic. I love that, but at the end of the day, I like to say I'm half Italian, half Hispanic, and all American, and that's what
Absolutely.
unites us. It's America, so there shouldn't be this thing of, submerging,
No, it's the
the
big melting
American.
pot.
Yeah,
as we
we're
all
the
would call it,
melting
right?
pot of the world. Everybody comes to the United
Exactly.
States, and then they become
Yeah.
Americans, and then they're proud of their country.
Right, exactly.
Let's change up a little bit. We were all there a couple of days ago up at Concord, and we got to listen to a few bills on the Common Core.
Yeah.
So, I want to get your take on education and this Common Core. What do you think?
Well, overall, here's another one. In theory, right, standards of education coming from the federal level, they sound good in theory, in that they'll say, okay, if a fifth grader in New Hampshire moves to, I'll just pick a state, Kansas,
Right.
we should be happy that they can seamlessly integrate, into fifth grade there because education is standardized. But my point, and the way I think about it is, what if New Hampshire is ranked second in the nation in education and Kansas is ranked 38th?
Right.
Well, if you standardize that, guess what happens? Kansas doesn't move up to where New Hampshire is.
No, we
it
move
means,
down to them.
Yeah, we either move down or they come up slightly, we move down. So it reduces everyone to the lowest common denominator. So I'm a big advocate and supporter of the 10th Amendment and states' rights, and I think local control is so important. Educational choice and freedom of opportunity and choice within that is extremely important. So my view is every child, every student, every family, they know best what works for their kid. They know their challenges, their strengths, and so if whatever school, or type of education system they're in, if that's not working, I want them to have as many options as they choose to pursue. So public school, public or private, charter school, private school, home education, online education, community college, I don't care,
Right.
I think that is your choice, and you should be able to have the opportunity to excel at whatever it is, you want to do, to the extent of, how much you can actually accomplish. So my issue with, Common Core and so many of these things is they talk about we're improving education because we're teaching, a new way of thinking and analysis. But in reality, we're already, behind on sort of what used to be just substantive
Right.
issues of, we're talking reading levels,
Right.
mathematics, these things. And instead of actually making the content more difficult, they changed the process, which then they say, oh, it's harder. But that's just harder because nobody's used
Right.
to it
Yeah,
anymore.
nobody knows it.
Yeah.
Brand new
So-
and hasn't been tested.
When kids
Yeah.
are using are allowed to use
Right.
calculators in school. I mean, when
Right.
I was a kid, I never got to use the calculator.
Right,
I don't think
and-
it was invented yet.
Right, and in the instance of Common Core too, and I know, frankly, there are a lot of things swirling around about it, some
Right.
that aren't necessarily true and some that aren't spoken about, that they are true. But I have a concern, I think there's a tricky balance, but a line you have to walk where, of course, we want, our children and future generations, competitive in the world and the global economy. And it is true that digital technology is huge, in this area. However, I do have concerns, when everybody suddenly, has an iPad, in all the schools, like books, are being replaced, traditional teaching methods. And you look at who is kind of the thought leaders of sort of education systems and processes, and they are, these huge corporations, Google, Apple, and guess what happens? They tie in their technology with their, education curriculum, and it's all there, and then it's, given to your student. And so eventually I think you will end up, just having sort of this mass control. And I know it almost sounds like, this sort of conspiracy type of thing, but, we see that actually occurring, and I think that's a part of this. So I would much prefer that, again, local school districts and parents instead be able to control what their children are learning and how.
Right.
Now, I don't know, has there been any studies on this Common Core to see if it's common to the world or to the planet, or is it only common to whoever decided to make it up?
I'm actually not sure. I'm not sure, but
Because if it helps us compete on a world market, then it's a good thing. Because, but somehow or another, I don't think so.
Well, but that's the thing. We're not competitive in so many areas, So again, are we just changing the rules of the game? It doesn't necessarily mean our kids are going to be able to build better built, bridges that aren't going to fall down. I actually was talking to a teacher, and she was saying that she teaches a foreign language, and so the kids would hand in their answers, and they're sort of right and, a little bit off here and there, and they're graded, accordingly. And she said, my husband used to always say, because he's an engineer, she used to always say, this is why math is great, because the answer is either right, or wrong.
Right.
Well, the kids said, no, that's not true. They said in math now, it matters how you tried. So they're like, so we fake it all the time. We just, kind of scribble this and that. And if it looks like we tried, it doesn't matter if the answer's right or wrong, So that's frightening.
It's very frightening.
Because that means your building's going to fall down.
You're going to build a bridge, and it's going to be, oh, well, I think I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, so, that's, and of course there's, again, so much swirling around this, and there are so many anecdotes, but overall, when you do look at tests, be that in our country, worldwide, how we are ranked comparatively, I have some serious concerns.
We're slipping, and we need to move in the
Yeah, we
opposite
definitely
direction.
need to get the education whole thing. Now, I'm going to ask you something. Right now, on a national level, Congress isn't looked at very well, which I really don't think is a fair assessment, but I will bring it up because I know it is a national level.
Sure.
And it seems that all the votes that Congress has tried to do to delay the Obamacare and delay the fiscal cliff and everything they tried working on it, which you're going to be thrown right into the middle of it if you get elected.
Yeah.
So it's like, what do you think of the fiscal cliff? Do you think the government should have shut down? First off, that'd be a good
It's interesting. I try to get opinions from people on that, and frankly, it's split. Some people say it's ridiculous that it has to come to this, and I
Yes.
agree with them. But then there are others that are saying, honestly, I'm at a state right now where I feel like the more the government does, the more harmful it is to me. So I kind of want them to just stop,
Yeah, and
So
a lot of people are they're kind of losing faith in government because you've got this stalemate going on between the Senate and the House of U.S. House, U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
And,
well, that, and again, a lack of will to negotiate from the president, and a lack of, frankly, leadership. I mean, again, this is someone who says one thing, does something else, changes, evolves, does all of these different things, doesn't support the Republican initiatives to delay certain things, and now is doing it himself. I mean, what is that?
Yeah, well, it's all of a sudden their idea, so it's a good idea, right? Or his idea, or whoever's it was. But ultimately, I believe they're delaying this whole thing because they realize it's not working. If people don't buy it, it's not going to work.
Right.
And young people especially aren't thinking about insurance right now. They're thinking about being able to
Right.
buy a new car, or being able to find a new job, or pay
that,
their
or
college bills.
how about though too that, you know, younger people, myself included,
Yeah.
we're used to options, you know, and things. So all of a sudden, you know, even, you know, in health care and health insurance, I know what type of, you know, specifications I would want, you know, for that coverage or whatever service I'm looking for. And so when you tell me that the government is now saying you have to enroll and you have to buy this, and by the way, if you don't, even if you don't need it,
Yeah.
don't want it, you know, whatever, I'm also going to fine you. I mean, this is not
It's just not-
positive
that's
reform.
un-American, to be honest.
Yeah,
Right, and
yeah,
I
agree.
can't believe that the Supreme Court ruled that it was constitutional to begin with.
Yeah,
Because as
well,
we know, you know, the
it's-
stuff like that, they can't force you to buy something that you
Right.
don't want.
Well, that's that tricky thing of how do you define certain things, right?
Yeah,
it's
for the good
problematic.
of the all, I guess, is what
Yeah.
they're trying to say. But you know, unfortunately, the plan was set up to work if young people sign up.
Right.
The older people are signing up
And being
only because they have no choice. First
Right,
off,
right.
because that's the Medicaid and all that is
They
all tied
consume
into
about
it.
80% of health care.
Right, and the baby
services, too.
boomers such as us, I mean,
Yeah.
we kind of benefit from it, but the younger generation
Well,
is forced to buy it.
not-
It's
not-
kind of like Social Security in my estimation, because you know, when Social Security started, you had 20 people paying into the system,
Yeah.
one taking out.
Yeah, you're buying
Now
futures.
it's completely
It's
opposite
futures.
now because
Yeah.
you got 3-to-1 ratio.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how does that work? And that's kind of scary too. So,
It's true.
Well, the whole Social Security thing is all you're doing is paying for futures, right? What you're buying, like,
Well, and that's a perfect example, again, of the government promising something and enacting, you know, where it's, okay, first it's voluntary, right? And then it was, oh, it's a trust fund, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's rated, it's this, that. And then you have, frankly, people like me and younger people that I fully expect that it won't actually be there for me, you know, so I have a totally different perspective
right.
on
Well, don't feel left out because I'm on the tail end of the
Yeah,
baby
and
boomers, and I feel the same way. It's probably not
you
going
know,
to be there.
you know, I still have about 6 years before I can retire, but that's at 62. I
Yeah.
would never go until 67 because,
Yeah.
you know, there might not be any money left by then.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so you never know. I don't know where the money went, but I think it went to disability and stuff like that, where it should have gone towards the.
Well, I mean, we've seen that even in our state, right? You know, it's like, okay, we'll just
Well,
take a
yeah.
little.
L-chip money over here.
We're seeing that here in
Yeah.
here in New Hampshire right now, where they keep opening the budget and pulling more out of
Right,
the surplus
right.
or whatever. Do you have a plan to get our debt down? Do you have any ideas how we might be able to get our debt down?
You know, it's that's obviously one of, you know, the most challenging things. And I don't like to make promises I can't keep. I'll be perfectly honest. In that, you know, I think we need to, you know, be looking at everything. You know, we need to be able to make these decisions. But as you know, I have a little bit of personal experience with, you know, what this sort of political and psychological situation is, because look, on the finance committee, right, when we had our $800 million hole, we're coming into, you know, the 2010 cycle, people sent us there saying,
Yeah.
balance our budget,
Yeah.
you know, fix this, da-da-da. So then what happened when we said, okay, well, that means we're going to have to find efficiencies here. We're going to have to cut a little of this here. Everybody said, don't touch mine, you know.
Right,
touch
right.
theirs.
Yeah, it's
So
always-
the
it's always
same
that.
thing, you
But we
know?
made the hard decisions
That's
that
right.
year, and
That's
we
right.
did.
And we actually got a surplus.
Exactly, exactly. So what that shows you is, again, I don't know if it's just the lack of will, you know, I don't know if lobbying interests are
Right.
just too strong and concentrated. I don't know what it is, but I can say that it's shocking to me and it's sad
Yeah.
that they treat, you know, these small things like, oh, look, we reduced, you know, just, you know, payments, or, you know, we reduced
Well,
spending a tiny bit. We didn't actually cut the debt, but they treat that as a triumph, you know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, oh, we raised the ceiling, but by less, you know, from last time. Like, that's
Yeah,
some
it's
Well,
sort
not
of
and then you
gonna
have
work
different
with
programs, like, for instance, Wheels on Meals.
it. Right.
Wheels on Wheels.
Meals on Wheels.
I'm just, I just kind of, I'm on the county,
Mm-hmm.
and in the county, that comes up all the time because they say, well, you cut it. Well, we didn't really cut it on
Mm-hmm.
the county. What happened is they didn't take it.
Mm-hmm.
So we have on the county level, and I'm sure it's going to be on a federal level,
Yeah.
you have all these agencies out there, but if they don't take it,
Right.
you don't give it to them. So
Right.
we didn't cut the program. If it's 62% less than it was last year, there's a reason for it, whether or not it may not be anything that we see right up front, but it's in the background somewhere. Either the
Right.
bus broke down that delivered it, or who knows.
Right. Right.
But you know, so that's
Yeah.
when you see stuff like that, and I'm sure you'll see a lot of that.
Yeah.
I think
had
we're coming down to
minutes
2
left.
minutes here,
We should
so
let Marilinda
we're gonna
do
give
a
you
little final
yeah. So why
talk
don't
to
you?
the audience.
Sure. Well, I mean, thank you for having me. This
Yeah.
was, this is the type of discussion that I think needs to happen. It's real. It's, again, people in the state, understanding that things need to be accomplished, reforms have to be enacted. We know, the stories of people. I would bet you well, I think this detachment is a problem. If Representative Custer and President Obama had to be on the phone telling people, by the way, today your premium's going up from $400 to $1,200, maybe they would feel differently about these things. I don't know, but I think it's important that elected officials, that we regain a sense of trust. I mean, I don't expect that everyone agrees with me 100% on every issue, and frankly, I don't agree with everyone 100% on either issue either. So, but I would hope, and what I would want to do and am trying during this campaign is, look, I want to tell you what I can, think I can do, how I want to do that, what I believe, why, and then I hope you support me, if we share that at all. And then I want to work with you, work with anybody that shares, my vision and my concerns, and try to actually accomplish good things for our country. And I think the way we can do that is by, with every vote, I would want to say, does this return power and choice and freedom to the people of New Hampshire,
Right.
or is this burdensome and take more of their hard-earned money and resources away from them and limit their freedoms? Those are not the kind of things I want to support.
Right.
I want to return power to New Hampshire citizens, and I think you're the best managers because you know your own life.
Right. So now, how do people get in touch with you
yeah.
on your website?
Good, yeah. So my website is marilindagarcia.com. So that's spelled MarilindaGarcia.com.
Great.
Okay, now I was just looking at your tweets before you read it because you're running a little late. So 12 minutes ago she was here. So you're on Twitter as well?
I do, and I have to say I do have Twitter on my phone. I also, though, have a wonderful team, of digital interns and staff working for me, so they're busy on Facebook and Twitter and all of this. So I can't take credit for all of the content I'm generating, but they're doing a great job, yeah. So I'm on Twitter. It's, I think, just Marilinda Garcia, and Facebook is, again, Marilinda Garcia.
Great. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you so
All right,
much.
this has been the Legislators Lounge. Once again, I'm the host of the show, Jim Webb, and the co-host is Brian Chiricello. And today we had the pleasure of having Marilinda Garcia on our show. Until next time, we'll see you then.